This is a brief lecture to accompany Unit 3 in COMS 5314. Our focus in this unit is on public communication in the STEM professions. The outcome of the unit is brief report number 3, which is called the Eliminating Jargon Report. So essentially, if you haven't looked at the assignment guidelines yet, for that report, you're going to find a scientific article of some sort, a peer-reviewed journal article in relation to one of the STEM professions, and you're going to write a one-page simplified version that eliminates all the jargon. So it's a pretty fun assignment, and I hope this lecture helps you see how the different readings for weeks 9, 10, and 11 prepare you for that next assignment. So here's the big question we addressed in Unit 3. Remember, for Unit 2, we addressed how experts communicate, or in some cases fail to communicate with other experts within their disciplines or beyond. Now in Unit 3, we consider experts' communication with the public. This focus is probably more in line with what you're used to thinking about when you think about science communication. The readings for Week 9 focus on media relations, that is, how do experts interact with the media? Assigned readings for Week 9 address the use of social media in healthcare, as well as a genre that doesn't always get the attention it deserves among scientific and biomedical experts, the press release. When we look at public discourse on this topic, it's usually about the poor quality of science communication. We see a few different trends here. One trend is to blame the media, like you see in this slide. It is all too easy to assume that science in its original form, in other words, as it's reported in peer-reviewed journals, is pure and objective, and then to blame science journalists for distorting scientific information. This is what's depicted in this infographic, which shows the scientist as the careful, thoughtful reporter of events that unfolded in the laboratory, and the journalist as the hurried, careless non-expert who was just looking for a good headline. The second trend is to blame the scientists, often depicted as being comfortable only inside the laboratory and unable to connect with wider external audiences. And a third trend is to blame the general public. This is also known as the deficit model of science communication. In other words, the assumption is that public minds are empty vessels waiting to be filled by media reports that we depend on to communicate accurately the results of the latest scientific research. As we've become aware of shortcomings in all three of these models, efforts to develop new models are underway. And here is just one, the dialogue model. As shown in this visual, the model tries to achieve a more complex and accurate understanding of the many different ways in which experts relate to the public, and it also tries to account for the fact that members of the so-called general public are not just empty vessels who passively wait for scientific information to fill their heads. Rather, they are active contributors who possess their own forms of knowledge. This visual also adds other important stakeholders, such as government and industry. Both readings assigned for Week 9 attempt, in different ways, to capture and understand this more complex, multifaceted understanding of science communication. The readings for Week 10 focus on provider-patient communication. Obviously, a very important form of public communication, one in which we will all participate at some point in some capacity. Assigned readings for Week 10 address 3 different sites at which medical experts interface with patients or with the public more generally. First, patient education and storytelling. Second, the informed consent process in medical research. And third, clinical nursing simulations. As a backdrop for these readings on patient-provider communication, I'd like to share clips from 2 TV shows, one from the 1970s and one from the 2000s. I think these brief clips say a lot about how our expectations for patient-provider communication have changed. As you'll see in the first one, the physician carries the traditional black bag. He is the expert, although of course he has time to travel to patients' homes for house calls. In the second, we see more of a dialogue between patient and provider, with the patient questioning everything the doctor says and clearly acquiring some amount of her own medical expertise.
No formula, just mommy's healthy, natural breast milk.
Yummy.
Her whole face just got swollen like this overnight.
Mm-hmm. No fever. Glands normal. Missing her vaccination dates.
We're not vaccinating. Good.
Think they don't work?
I think some multinational pharmaceutical company wants me to think they work. Pad their bottom line.
Mm. May I? Sure. Ribbit. All natural, no dyes is a good business. All natural children's toys. Toy companies, they don't arbitrarily mark up their frogs. They don't lie about how much they spend on research and development. And the worst that a toy company could be accused of is making a really boring frog. Ribbit. You know another really good business? Teeny tiny baby coffins. You can get them in frog green, fire engine red. Really. The antibodies in Yummy Mummy only protect the kid for 6 months, which is why these companies think they can gouge you. They think that you'll spend whatever they ask to keep your kid alive. Want to change things? Prove them wrong. A few hundred parents like you decide they'd rather let their kid die than cop up $40 for a vaccination. Believe me, prices will drop really fast. Ribbit.
Tell me what she has.
A cold.
Okay, so to summarize, as you move into the readings for week 10, I encourage you to think about how each of these readings, in its own way, calls into question this traditional model of communication often referred to as the transmission model or the sender-receiver model. Instead, kind of like we saw in regard to science communication for the week 9 readings, each of these authors is trying to achieve a more nuanced, more complicated understanding of how effective communication occurs between patient and provider. And an important part of that, as you saw in the more recent video clip, is that we really have to account for the knowledge and expertise that non-experts, such as patients, bring to the patient-provider encounter. We can't just think of audiences as passive vessels anymore, in other words. The readings for week 11 focus on simplicity and complexity. More specifically, what happens when we take complex information and simplify it? What is lost and what is gained? Obviously, this will be a nice prelude for the brief report assignment that comes right after this week. Assigned readings for week 11 address simplicity and complexity from different perspectives and in different disciplines. The first 2 articles look more specifically at situations where scientific information is simplified, asking what is lost and gained, but also what is the impact on the audience. The third is a more theoretical article providing an overview of the types of knowledge that are fundamental to science. As shown in this magazine, The Simple Life, simplicity sells. As you move into the readings for week 11, I encourage you to think about this a little bit. What is it about simplicity that is so powerful from a rhetorical perspective? What is its unique appeal? Why does simplicity have power over us, and what happens when experts use that power to connect with non-expert audiences? Here's one example of simplicity in action in the scientific context. This is an image of the prion, one of many images available through an online search. This is the focus of the article by Carol Reeves that you're going to read for this week. To summarize, in that article, she closely examines how the concept of the prion, even though it turned out later to be unfounded, allowed one scientist, Stanley Prusiner, to outdo numerous competitors in the race to understand infectious brain diseases, including mad cow disease and others in the same category. She argues that Prusiner's use of the prion allowed him to get ahead in this race, not because his science was good, but because the prion enabled a simple explanation that captured the attention of key audiences within and outside the academy. And here's another example, this one from my own research. When the term hormone was first used in a 1905 lecture by British physician Ernest Henry Starling, it was a game changer. For many decades prior to this, researchers had been trying to figure out how the organs within the body communicate with each other to enable complex processes like digestion and respiration. They knew there was some kind of chemical substance enabling this internal communication, but they struggled to name it. They were using vague terms like chemical messenger. Historians of medicine say that Starling came up with the term hormone the night before he gave his now famous lecture to the Royal Society in London. It happened while he was having dinner with a classics professor who suggested the term hormone, which derives from the Greek word for that which sets in motion. The rest is history. You can see a modern-day visual depiction of hormones on this slide. There are the green dots that carry messages between organs to enable, in this case, digestion. Having a simple term like this allowed scientists to come to an agreement on a subject that had previously seemed too complex to handle. And it allowed eventually for the establishment of a whole new medical specialty that we now call endocrinology. So that is it for my Unit 3 lecture. Like I said at the beginning, I hope these readings provide each in their own way kind of a useful backdrop for this next assignment. And if you haven't already, you need to go ahead and read the assignment guidelines for that, because I'd like you to be kind of thinking about which article you're going to select right away, and that way you can start thinking about techniques and strategies that you're going to use in simplifying it as we move through all these readings. So thanks very much. I look forward to hearing from you on the discussion board.